Hello, welcome. Good evening. How wonderful is this? To an In Conversation event with Nell Zink. My name is Jaclyn Crupi, and I'm a bookseller, a book editor, an event host, an awards judge, and just a generally bookish person to have around. I'm also the author of several food, culture, and gardening books, but what I am that is most important tonight is a voracious reader of fiction. Fiction is the art form that excites me most, and for that reason, I'm delighted to be in conversation with Nell Zink. I would like to acknowledge that this event is taking place on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Great Kulin Nation. I pay respects to elders past and present. I'm going to introduce you now, Nell, and tell you, this wonderful audience, some things about your wonderful books. So Nell Zink is the author of 7 acclaimed novels, including her debut, The Wall Creeper, which is described by the Sunday Times as a slim, strange masterpiece. And I think I would actually describe several of your novels in that exact way. We have the National Book Award long-listed Mislaid. It was also a New York Times Book of the Year. Doxology, Avalon, and most recently, Sister Europe. She's been praised by Jonathan Franzen, and we will talk a little bit about him later, as a writer of extraordinary talent and range. She's previously worked as a secretary with stints in masonry, technical writing and translating, and her writing has appeared in N+1, Granta and Harper's Magazine. She lives just outside Berlin. Please join me in welcoming her to the Wheeler Centre and to Melbourne.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So there will be time for audience questions towards the end of our event tonight. I will prompt you with a reminder. Lovely Wheeler Centre ushers will have microphones that they'll be roaming, and if a microphone comes to you, please feel free to ask a wonderful question. Our bookseller for
Wonderful questions only.
Wonderful questions only and not long, rambly statements. We all don't like those. Our bookseller for tonight is my wonderful former colleague from Hill of Content Bookshop, the wonderful Hill of Content here in Melbourne City. And they have copies of Nell's latest novel, Sister Europe, as well as some of her brilliant backlist.
I saw that place when I was walking here, and I was like, the Hill of Content?
Yeah. So it's a play on words, obviously, and when A.H. Spencer opened it over 100 years ago now, that part of Melbourne was very seedy. It was the red light district, and there was a lot of violence and Melbourne gangsters, and he wanted to have a very sort of light name for the bookshops, hoping people would ignore that seedy aspect of the city. I suspect they enjoyed that seedy aspect of the city, those early customers of the Hill of Content bookshop. So now I hoped we could start by talking about fiction as a form, as an art form that we both love. I feel that's inherent in your work, your love of fiction. And then we'll go on to have a close look at this latest work, Sister Europe. So this is your 7th novel, which is remarkable, and all of your books have done something really exciting with this form of fiction. Can you tell us a little bit about how you chose fiction to be your art form, or how it chose you and found you?
Well, I think I was moved to write fiction probably, when it comes right down to it, for the same reason that the Romantic poets wrote poetry. I mean, art is in the air. People want to be artists, and there is exactly one kind of art that you can do with paper and a pencil. You don't need a studio. You don't need equipment. It's like, the poor man's art form, writing. And
So
okay, that's on a sort of meta level. That's probably what was happening, because who knows? I could have been a famous pianist if I'd had lessons, or a film director if my parents had been film directors. Why not?
So do you think it was the accessibility of writing?
Well, I liked telling stories even as a child, and I thought of myself as a good storyteller. I'm not sure that's entirely true, but occasionally I would get praise for my stories that I told. And my parents were huge readers. Their house was just completely weighted down with books. They had more books than anyone else I've ever known.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of books.
They were maniacs. My mother had been a librarian.
Right.
And my dad also liked books. And I think they were also not necessarily born to be parents, but my mother taught me to read when I was 3.
Yeah, wow.
Because once you get a book into a child's hands, it sits in a corner.
Yeah,
It doesn't
quietly.
bother
Yeah,
anyone.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and this is, 1967. So, I read a lot starting very young, and she had wanted to be, I don't know, being a writer was always held up to me as the best thing a person could be.
That's so interesting.
Strangely enough.
I also started reading very young,
Yeah.
but I was motivated by my older sister. I wanted to do what she was doing, and she was reading, and so I was like, I'm gonna read too. And so at first I just pretended to be reading, and then I made her sort of sit down and teach me. And yeah, I think it was about 3 or 4 by the time I was sort of reading independently. It's a wonderful thing to give a child. I mean, I just remember saying to people, have you read a book? You can read books. There are books everywhere. Just pick one up and read it. It's amazing.
But I think the effect of that, and I'm not saying scientists should study us, but I think the written word is my native language. I was not a talkative child. I was more of a shy child. But if I'm, if the same kid who doesn't want to talk in school is sitting there like, with their eyes glued to Dumas Fils all night, something's going on. And so, like, if I'm singing a song, if I imagine the words in front of me, I can sing it more expressively for, whatever that means.
Yeah. There are people who, when they hear songs with lyrics, they don't hear words. They just are listening to the music. I had no idea that you could do that, because for me, I want to hear the story in the song. And so I'm really focused on the words, because to me, it's storytelling. But there's a lot of people who only hear the music, which I find completely fascinating. But that's a different conversation.
Yes. Okay.
So you published your first completely brilliant novel. I'm referring to Mislaid, because that was the novel that was first published in Australia when you were 50 years old.
Yes.
Which is a wonderful thing. But you'd been writing for many, many years before that, but for an audience of one.
True.
Can you tell us a little bit about those writings and who you wrote them for?
Well, it's too weird to be really credible. However, it's true that, I'd always liked writing. I'd done a lot of writing. I had a little indie rock zine when I lived in New York and Philadelphia. And I moved to Israel in 97, like the end of 96, and met this guy, Avner Schatz, who is still like my absolute best pal.
Right.
And he was a writer, a novelist, and a short story writer. And he had just, when I met him, published his first novel. To date, also his last novel, because it got savaged in the press, and they just tore it to pieces on the radio, and it was actually pretty good, as far as I know, because I can't read it because it's in really, really complicated Hebrew and it hasn't been translated. So this is like one of the running jokes of my life, that I haven't read my best friend's novel, but
you have a very good excuse.
well, almost not anymore, because he could upload it to DeepL,
right?
Like DEEPL,
Yeah.
Great AI translator, great machine translation. But anyway,
So you shared your writing with him?
so as he remarked to me, it seemed to me like, okay, if I want to publish a novel, I can go through this horrifying ordeal of submitting it to editors who are total strangers and are going to make me rewrite it 27 times, so that for the rare privilege of being criticized in public, so my friends can read it, or I could just send it to them by email, and then they'd have it too, and I could skip that whole publishing thing, and just, like, if I want to write a book for Avner, why should I submit it to a publisher? I just give it to Avner. So that's what I did. I wrote books for Avner. And it sounds like some sort of performance art project that I was eventually planning to go public with, but it was not. I was just writing books for Avner.
So interesting. And I want to talk about what changed and what happened then, because a lot of really great writers cite you as their favourite writer, which I think is an ultimate compliment. I mean, Jonathan Franzen being not a bad person to say nice things about your work.
I saw something really scary recently. Someone showed me this. This photographer, Sally Mann, published a memoir. And on the first page, it's my favorite writer, Nell Zink. It was like,
You see it a lot. You come up a lot in the work of other artists. But I'll quote Franzen. He has said that your work insistently raises the possibility that the world is larger and stranger than the world you think you know. So at this point in your career, Franzen becomes your mentor, your provocateur, and your agent, your literary agent.
He tried.
He tried. And he wants you to change the way you write. So he doesn't want you to write for one person anymore. He wants to make it more sellable. And I have to quote you here.
No, he did not do that. That was my idea.
Okay. Well,
because
can I just quote
a nice
you
person.
For a moment?
Oh, yeah?
Because it's possible not everyone here knows this story, and this is just one of my favourite literary stories. But you said, for most writers, you'd think this would be a dream come true, Franzen being your agent. But actually, after about a year of Jonathan Franzen trying to be my agent and failing, I ended up feeling sorry for him. And that's why I wrote Mislaid, because I thought, this poor guy, he's trying to sell this really weird novel, so I'll write something with a little bit more commercial potential and make his life easier. I hated watching him suffer, particularly because he's so good at suffering. It's one of the best quotes. So can you tell us about writing Mislaid and trying to help out Jonathan Franzen?
Well, I told it pretty well there.
You did.
He tried to the work of mine that I still had, because I had a habit of deleting entire novels when they weren't written for Avner. The ones I wrote for Avner, I sent to Avner, so Avner had them. But the ones I wrote for myself, I would just delete and forget, or they'd be on some old laptop that ended up in the garbage or whatever. Right. So what was I saying?
So he was trying to sell The Wall Creeper at this point.
Right. So he was not trying to sell The Wall Creeper. The book he really liked was called Sailing Toward the Sunset by Avner Schatz, which was my attempt, not only barely knowing Hebrew, very, very weak Hebrew, to translate his book into English. So I kind of let myself be inspired by the few words I could understand, which is not a lot. And so I wrote this book that's supposedly a translation of Avner's book, but it's not.
Okay.
And Franzen really liked that. So he was trying to sell that to people and getting absolutely nowhere. And I don't know what he thought of The Wall Creeper exactly.
Okay.
Because I found a publisher for that in despair, with no help from him at all. But I also got an advance of $300.
Right.
And what he had said it would be possible for me to do, and it turned out to be true, would be to make a living and not have to do anything but write novels, which, it's the dream.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
So
you wrote Mislaid.
I wrote Mislaid in a style, to be the sort of a book that maybe someone would pay money for.
Yeah.
And I succeeded.
Yeah, you were completely right about that. It's a wonderful novel. If you haven't read it, you must seek it out. I think about it all the time.
I like it too.
And I read it back, when it was first published, and it feels it lives inside me still. So as much as I want to go through...
I'm very proud of that book.
Oh, you should be. It's an extraordinary work. I'd love to go through each of your books,
okay.
But I do want to focus on Sister Europe. So one final question about fiction broadly in this early stage of your career. I would love to know what it is about fiction that excites you, that keeps drawing you back and keeping you there.
I think, it's... I don't know if the really immersive kind of hallucinatory reading that you do when you're a child, I don't know if that still happens to me. I don't think so. I think the experience of reading something like Lord of the Rings when you're 12, it is probably more vivid than things now. But at the same time, a good character in a book can become very real and three-dimensional to me. And you end up knowing way more about.
Yeah. You can tell that in your work, that you know so much more about this character than what you're putting on the page.
If you read an Ann Tyler novel or something, and you end up knowing more about these characters than you know about your very best friends.
Absolutely.
Because they still might have a secret. You know? And so in a sense, because an author writing a novel novels are long. It's 200 pages at least before people start calling it a novel. And you end up like scraping the inside of your head, like just getting anything that's in there very likely is going to end up on the page, assuming it's a literary novel and you're not just writing genre and trotting out the tropes and putting them through their paces. There's going to be a lot communicated about someone's worldview in the fiction they write. And that's part of the reason I write fiction, to be honest, is thinking, okay, you only live once. If you free associate for 200 pages and write it down, then you have a record of what was on your mind at that time. So like if I read my novel Nicotine, I know what was going through my head in March of 2015.
It's so interesting because we think of fiction.
It's a very, very detailed kind of diary.
Yeah. And we think of fiction as fabricated and constructed and not reflecting an author's true life. But that's a very simplistic reading.
Well, it's maybe not what happens to them, but how they're trying to fight back.
Yeah,
it's there in the fiction. I mean, obviously, most of life you're just influenced by forces beyond your control. But you have a conception of how you'd like life to go and what you think life might be.
I have a question
and that can come to light in the fiction you write in a very explicit way. You see what people's values are. I
think it does in this book particularly, actually, the sort of the worldview and that moment in time and that city, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about Sister Europe and this incredible book. And I want to see if we can sort of slowly reveal to our audience tonight what your book is doing and how it's working, so that our conversation sort of attempts to replicate the structure of the book and the experience then for the reader reading it. So I hope you're up for that. Okay. So to that end, you start the book with a father telling a bedtime story to his young daughter before he heads out for the evening. That story, it's an unusual bedtime story. It's about melted ice caps, tsunamis, general complete natural destruction, sort of perfect material for a 4.5-year-old. But it establishes a comic register, I think, and a tone for this work. But it's not your average bedtime story. How did you come to start the book in that moment and then follow on from there?
I think it's, to some extent, a book about storytelling. So I wanted to start it with a story. There are a lot of stories embedded in the book, stories within the story. And where people tell stories, or they, recite stories they've written. And in this case, it's this father, Damien, inventing a story on the spot because his daughter wants to hear something about a tsunami. Sorry, you're making me think, and that's bad.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think thinking is good. But when you were saying when people tell stories, do you think it reveals something about themselves?
So why I started the novel that way, I have to admit that's a hard question to answer.
I thought it was such an interesting sort of entry point because, it's short. It's a short moment, and we do a full circle in the book. The book eats its tail so beautifully. But I was completely there, and I thought I was reading one book, and then off he goes, and then the book sort of takes me somewhere completely different, and there's this huge cast of characters, and all these different things start happening. But we start with this domestic moment of a father and a daughter. And I enjoyed the story.
It made sense to me then, and it makes sense to me now. I needed to establish that Damien is a decent guy, a slightly troubled guy, with perhaps trivial ideas in his head sometimes. I don't know. I think you write things and then say, does that work? No, I'll readjust it here, readjust it there.
Yeah, and it's hard to
And
revisit why did you do that and where did that come from?
well, did I even have a
Yeah,
reason?
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I want to talk about process and how much of your process you're aware of towards the end of the talk. But let's continue on into the story. So we've got this bedtime story, and then Damien gets ready and off he heads. And the first half of the book revolves around these various characters, and we'll talk about some of them. We can't possibly talk about all of them, but they're making their way to an award ceremony. And it's a great device for you to introduce us to this interesting cast of characters, and you sort of pass us from one to the next as they're all moving through Berlin to arrive at this awards ceremony, and we're getting closer to start time. I'd love to know sort of, did you always know you were going to structure the book and organise it in this way and get these characters moving?
Yes. I wanted to have a big cast, 6 or 7 people, and like, you know, create them out of nothing and then braid them together and send them on a journey.
Yeah. I mean,
and their journey is from the Intercontinental Hotel near Berlin Zoo to the Burger King on the other side of the park on a night in February in the rain.
Yeah. I was sort of hoping it was going to be rainy tonight to really emulate this sort of Berlin evening here in Melbourne, but I couldn't make that happen in early autumn.
It's just about the 3rd anniversary of their fateful walk.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
because it's a certain night. It's the 21st of February of 23.
It's you do this so brilliantly, but when you finally herd your characters into this much anticipated awards ceremony, it becomes a sort of non-event. I'll say that. Many of the characters miss it entirely, which I loved. And then for some, it becomes like a Louis Buñuel film where they can't leave.
Yeah.
And you've got them trapped in there. It's so weird and it's funny and it's unexpected. I did not see that being...
Well, the exterminating angel. That's
the exterminating
Buñuel film.
angel,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to know, did you always know that this event, that the central event to this story was going to, that was going to happen, that you were going to sort of derail these characters, or did these characters derail you?
I mean, I wrote this book for some people in Switzerland who were with me at a very similar event.
Right.
I mean, I have the program of that event on my phone. It was really extraordinary. And
should we explain that the program was very structured and everything was going to happen within sort of 7-minute intervals, and then speakers speak for far longer than they're supposed to?
It's a privately sponsored literary awards ceremony, and the program says that from 6 p.m. until 6:03, so-and-so will speak. From 6:04 to 6:07, so-and-so will speak. I mean, it really was all there on a sheet of paper in elaborate detail. And they hadn't even, I mean, it was bilingual, and they hadn't even remembered that reading the translation was going to take some time.
Yeah.
And the reason, well, in the real-life event that inspired this novel, that I wouldn't say it was material, it was just inspiration. It was just like, wow, I wonder if something that surreal will ever happen to me again. I have to get this down on paper.
And did it go for as long as?
It was like 2.5 hours before we got any
Yeah,
dinner,
yeah.
and it was really, truly impressive.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Lebanese, the very, very famous Lebanese Arabic poet Adonis was there, and of everything that happened at that ceremony, the only thing they didn't translate was the poetry of Adonis. Which just goes to show you, like, they were not thinking about the audience. No.
I would love to talk.
So that was inspiration. That gave me the sort of emotional drive to want to recreate not that night, but a similar kind of situation where an event that has this allure, namely free food. We were all there for the free food. Like, who would come out for free food? I mean, it's going to be a certain kind of person. They might even have money, but a certain kind of person will still come for the free food.
And we should say the food was to be supplied by a Michelin hat chef.
Yes.
Michelin star.
Michelin star. So yeah, I'm probably confusing the living tar out of you people. I'm very sorry.
No, I feel... I do wonder, so we're talking a lot about these characters. How formed do they come to you? Are they fully formed, or are you said you know so much more about them than is on the page, but this cast of characters, how well did you know them before you started writing?
I knew them intimately. I knew them very well, because I think if you want to save yourself work as a novelist, like really get to know your characters, know everything about them.
Yeah, you do feel
everything.
That. Yeah.
And then you don't have that agonizing moment where you say, wait a second, this guy was supposed to be stubborn.
Right.
But actually, now that I'm writing him, he seems really kind of, weak-willed and flexible. And then you have to somehow change the scenes from the beginning of the book where he's stubborn. It's a real ordeal.
Yeah.
So it really helps to know what you're doing.
That's good advice. Was it Hemingway who talked about the iceberg and how...
Iceberg?
A novel, it's all like a novelist knows everything that's happening below the water, and there's so much more happening.
Well, in Hemingway, it's definitely an iceberg.
Right.
I mean, there are novelists that really put it all out there. Someone like Jonathan Franzen.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's anything he ever thinks about one of his books that's not in the book.
Yeah, right.
Whereas that's a fine thing. It just depends on what you want to read.
Yeah. Now you write these tight, concise, strange, alluring books. So the book is this character study of this great wide range of characters, and it's a diverse and really interesting group. And I've mentioned Damien. His teen trans daughter, Nicole, joins the event. I'll try not to confuse everyone if you haven't read it, but because she's noticed by his friend Toto, who's also attending, and he runs across Nicole on the street en route to the event. She appears to be soliciting herself, so Toto extricates her by getting her to tag along to the event. What Nicole's actually doing, though, is she's trying to ascertain, she's in the middle of sort of her trans journey, and she wants to know if she can pass basically as a hot babe. And so she's sort of going and trying to figure that out. And I feel like Nicole is such an incredibly well-drawn character, both in terms of her as a teen. I feel you capture that teen voice so well, but also as, someone exploring gender identity. And I wondered what sort of work you need to do to really know her as a writer before you start writing, because you're not a teen and you're not trans, and so what work do you do to sort of capture her?
Well, it was partly just years of talking to people, friends with trans children, friends with trans spouses. It's happening, and also reporters doing a reportage on the process, and I mean. It's possible to gather the information, and I think the idea of to be a decent writer, obviously you have to be able to sort of project yourself into the position of someone you're not.
Yeah.
At the same time, it was sort of fun to write that character, because I think if you're a woman who was a tomboy, you've transitioned probably.
Yeah.
There comes that time when you're 15 and you're like, how would I look with long fingernails and high-heeled shoes? I could try that. Is that, and is that femininity, or is that masochism? I mean, these thoughts are something that a woman can have just as easily.
Absolutely.
As someone who's trying to switch.
I think we're all sort of exploring our gender identity in ways and times across our lives.
Some more than others. Some people are just comfy cozy in their skins from the start, but it's definitely a continuum.
Yeah, I shouldn't have been so surprised, because in Avalon you capture teenagers so well as well. I feel like that you've got something about understanding teenagers, because when a teen character doesn't ring true on the page, it's, as a reader you feel it immediately. But I feel you've really you understand teenagers.
I'm in touch with my inner teen.
You really are. It's wonderful to see. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, I think. I also want to talk about a character who you call the Flake. She's the other young woman in the novel.
She was the first character who came to
Was
me.
she?
I
I'm
was
not
originally going to call it
surprised.
the Flake.
Right, she's
Yeah.
such a great character. I could read a whole novel about her. I love her. But I can't do her justice. Tell us more about the Flake.
Well, she's a party girl from West Virginia who's landed in Berlin, because, it all takes place in Berlin.
Yes.
And she is radically inclusive. Mm-hmm. She has sort of taken a vow to herself to that nothing human is foreign to her. She accepts everyone just at face value, and she hugs everyone, except, of course, her internet date, Toto, because she's gone online. The reason they're both there, the reason she turns up at this party is because Toto, who's Damien's best friend, Damien's a German guy, Toto's an American guy, he's from Texas, but he's been living in Berlin for a long time, and he is just like a swinging guy.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say anything too vulgar.
No.
And so he has been in touch with this woman on an app for quite a while, and she is always flaking. She never comes to their dates. She always has some crazy excuse, but she doesn't turn up. So he invites her to the dinner, thinking that she won't turn up, and then there she is, because free food.
Yeah. So the final character I want to talk about before you do a reading of a section that sort of brings them all together in this nice way, and with apologies to all the wonderful male characters in the book, I really have focused on the women, but it's Livia. She's the granddaughter of a Nazi pilot. She has this inherited legacy that really haunts her. She lives in a literal glasshouse. She's seeking to make changes to her life, but she's really lost in midlife. I felt. You may disagree.
No,
but there's
I don't
such
disagree.
emotional depth to her in this short novel. And for me, she really was sort of the heft of the book.
She's Sister Europe, yeah.
Yeah, she's Sister Europe. Tell us a little bit about Livia.
Well, I suppose I occasionally do meet these people who are very rich and very beautiful, which you'd think would be like a one-way ticket to happiness,
Amazing.
But no. They're tragic.
Yeah, tortured.
And that sort of shimmering paradox of the questioning one's own life compulsively.
Yeah.
No matter how good it is.
She resonated with me incredibly strongly, maybe just because I'm the same age as her, or I just sort of felt, she brought this heft. It's the only way I can describe it, and I thought she was just a remarkable character.
Oh, thank you.
Would you like to read from this moment where we bring these characters together?
It's really hard to pick a place to read from.
It is. It's a tricky book to choose a section.
But this is page 65, so we're in some. So just so you know, the trans daughter who's 15 years old is named Nicole, and the flake is also known as Avianca. Oh, yeah. That's her given name.
She does have a real name.
Okay. And they're now in the hotel lobby waiting around for this award ceremony to start. Damien hovered, standing, unsure which faction interested. Oh, maybe I should read the paragraph before, sorry. Having grown to 9 people, the group separated into 2 parts that could roughly be categorized as the young and the old. Avianca and Fisty is Livia's dog, sat on the rug.
Not to mention the dog.
We forgot the dog's a major character.
Sorry, everybody.
Facing the sofa occupied by Nicole and Radi. Radi is an Emirati prince. Masoud, that's the guy who's going to get the prize, his wife Ibtisam, Toto, Livia, and this Emirati ambassador perched on the other sofa and chairs, Toto's having fetched extras from the next bay over. Damien hovered, standing, unsure which faction interested him more. As a girl, close up and without her coat, Nicole missed the mark, flat-chested, small-eyed, in need of peach fuzz depilation. But as a boy in girl's clothing, she exerted a sexiness even her father could feel. Seeing her juxtaposed with Avianca, he was reminded of the scene in A Foreign Affair, when Marlene Dietrich dismisses the wholesomely attractive Jean Arthur as having a face like a well-scrubbed kitchen floor. Avianca was a human peach, sexy in a bite into me and you will encounter no resistance kind of way, whereas Nicole, not as a girl, but as a boy who was a girl, had a style. The style was disquieting, an uneasy mix of self-vanquishing and raw nerves, but it was clear that she could aim high. He rested his eyes, still wide in incredulity, both genuine and faked, for a moment on Livia, who, although she was speaking, betrayed no emotion whatsoever. Her beauty, for him, was a force of the they who have power to hurt and will do none variety. That's a Shakespeare sonnet. She protected others by retracting its claws like a cat. If she were to dress up like Nicole or go naked like Avianca, Avianca was not remotely naked, but to Damien there was something naked about her, so fresh and unpremeditated. All present would be robbed of the power of speech, he was sure. She would rival the collective vision of the living Aphrodite in Pierre Luce's pornographic novel, Aphrodite. His daughter was hoping to get a body that could pass. He sighed. Nicole unfolded her black cocktail napkin and spread it on her knee. Her bulbous goblet was hard to drink from without leakage, and wiping her mouth was making her fingers sticky. She said to Radi in a low and whorish voice, "We're not staying. Avianca and I want to walk the dog before dinner. Don't you want to come?" Radi found the offer delightfully explicit, but was forced to say, "I can't. I'm the one presenting the award." Nicole said that was a shame. To the embarrassment of her father, she sounded satirical and patronizing, but Radi responded, "It's fine. We'll see each other later after your walk." I'd be honored. Was she being sarcastic? Damien felt deeply insecure. "Would you now?" Radi said. He stretched over, they were on the same sofa, but almost 3 feet apart, to gather Nicole's hair at the back of her head with his hand, pulling it softly. Damien flinched, but Nicole didn't. She said, "Yes," and Radi lowered the hand to caress her shoulder. After what seemed to Damien like an eternity, she turned again toward Radi and asked, gracelessly but clearly aiming to show off her manners, "So, Prince Radi, what do you do? For a living?" "No, for fun." "Talk to you, of course." The banality and obviousness of their flirtation was too much for Avianca, and she said, "Come on, Radi, what do you do? Do you have a day job, or is it just prince stuff?" Standing in for my grandmother at ceremonies is as close as I ever get to prince stuff. I try to ignore it. "So would I. What do you think of Livia's dog here? Isn't he the best?" She rubbed Fisty's ears. "I like him very much." He was surprised to learn the dog was Livia's and glanced at her. She returned his gaze without interest, in conversation with the ambassador. He released Nicole and leaned forward, reaching down to pet Fisty. Avianca said, "I think he's the best dog I ever saw. Look at how his ears will turn inside out." Captivated, but also bored, Damien began to eavesdrop on the ambassador's description of a real estate investment he was considering. The potential development was in a formerly French section of Istanbul, where Livia had been many times. With perfect tact, she was praising his choice of rundown buildings to demolish. He was visibly torn between the two conversations, but he could tell that his presence was cramping Nicole's style, which might be a good thing, or not. He nodded to Livia and took a corner of her chair. Then he stood up again. He wanted to move between the two groups, but also to watch her at work. Livia dealt with challenging social situations by identifying with her performance, deploying flattering body language, and expressing warm but impersonal emotions with her face, while formulating brief speeches that conveyed informed curiosity and absolute discretion. Non-Europeans found her aloof or arrogant. This was especially true of youngsters, such as Avianca, but it kept even the ambassador at a distance. She referenced the urgent need for affordable housing, the advances made particularly by Japanese architects with regard to negotiable common space. All her information was from Damien. The warming climate of Istanbul, hearsay, she hadn't been there since the Gezi Park crackdown, and other topics that had nothing to do with her. Her art of defensive conversation never veered into the personal, not even tangentially or by implication. Thus, the ambassador's most pressing immediate concerns, her domicile and sexual availability, remained opaque mysteries. To address either in the midst of such an intelligent topical discussion would have seemed a rude and random non sequitur. He waited to see whether she ever maintained eye contact for more than half a second. She did not. Damien could see that he was suffering. Still standing, drinking his drink, he continued watching Livia and darting furtive looks at his daughter, who now lay slumped back on the couch with shining eyes, staring at Radi, responding in monosyllables and soft grunts to whatever he was saying. At regular intervals, she twitched awkwardly to adjust her hair before sinking back into a state of repose. Avianca took an active part in their conversation, nodding encouragement, which she underlined with frequent interjections such as, "Totally!" while looking from one to the other like someone watching a tennis match, and petting Fisty's withers mechanically. He had put his head down between his front paws and was feigning sleep. Radi illustrated his speech with elaborate gestures. To all appearances, he was talking about cooking.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
It's always so special to hear an author read. And what we haven't talked about yet is you set these characters in motion, you bring them together, and the things that they're thinking about and talking about. And you said earlier that your books are a reflection on yourself and what you were thinking at the time of writing them and things happening in the world. Looking back on this book, what do you say? What were you thinking about when you wrote it?
I didn't mean consciously. I just mean that
Right.
inevitably, when you're writing a book,
Yeah.
it's going to be your head in that moment.
And so do you now look at the book and recognise any of those aspects of what you were trying to make sense of?
Well, okay, I'm looking at the book to see. Okay.
Is it going to come through?
I look at the book and I think...
I can prompt you if you'd like.
You want to prompt me?
No, I don't. But if you need me to. I don't want to abandon you either.
I mean, the Nicole's trans journey, that was something that was on my mind. I mean, it was on a lot of people's minds. And you know, if you're directly affected by something like that in any way. And also the contrast between American and European culture, and I suppose you know, Australia is analogous to America,
Absolutely,
very much, and being an even more you know, a British colony of even more recent date, without this. You know, of the people in this book, the indigenous person is Livia. She's the German, the really very, you know, dyed-in-the-wool German person, a Prussian, you know, a Berlin person, and so she's dealing with an immense amount of baggage.
she really is. Yeah. There's I want to talk about Berlin, actually, because it also, I mean, it's a big part of the book. The city, as these characters traverse it and talk about it and its neighbourhoods and its history, becomes sort of a character in its own right. You very much place us there. Most of your books now, I want to say all, but I hate speaking in absolutes without feeling really confident, have been set in the US. This is your first...
The Wall Creeper plays in Europe. It's in
you're right.
Bern and Berlin.
So most of your books have taken place in the US, but this is a decidedly European novel, I felt. You live near Berlin now. Do you feel that the city has sort of permeated your work?
Well, I don't live in Berlin.
No, you live an hour from...
I suppose especially recently, I've been reading more about the history of Berlin. I've been reading more about, why exactly my neighbors are the way they are. And it's something that does come up in the novel because Livia has inherited a sort of plantation house. And, in the as late as the 19th century and even into the 20th, people under the German Empire, there wasn't serfdom per se, but in practical terms, there was something resembling serfdom. People really were attached to the local nobility, and the nobility had a lot of power, especially in what became East Germany, especially east of the Elbe River, and in what is now Poland. Back when it was Germany, it was a very, very conservative society with these huge power differentials, terrible class system, and I mean that was one thing that was on my mind, and also just the sort of cultural differences maybe a lot of you here have encountered, where you when you're talking to European people, you end up being kind of amazed how much they can talk without revealing anything personal. Whereas if you sit next to a strange American on a plane, you're going to be hearing about their miscarriage and how it led to their divorce. That's just how Americans roll. And because they know they're never going to see you again. It's a chance for free therapy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I lived in Switzerland for 5 years and made what I thought genuinely good Swiss friends, but when I thought about it, I really didn't know much about them, and that was notable. And
it's astonishing how little you can sometimes know.
Yeah,
and the secrets that will be revealed.
Yeah,
or even like a really, really good German friend will tell you that he has a girlfriend, like an hour, like a year and a half.
Right.
He's had her for a year and a half, and then you find out that your best friend has a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And you're like, you what?
Like, it never came up before.
Your American friends would be like, today's our year-and-a-half anniversary.
So the final aspect of this book I want to touch on before we move to process, because I would love to pick your brain about your writing process, is the sort of architectural beauty and simplicity in the structure, and the way you do it within this confined time frame. And it's roughly 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. more or less.
Roughly.
More or less.
Yeah.
And I really love novels that constrain time and try to take place completely within this sort of constrained period. But I wondered, how did that framework help or hinder how this story came together?
See, I have trouble looking at the question in that way because, if my novel Doxology spans, 30 years.
Yeah.
And in this novel, I just wanted to have a portrait of this night.
Nice.
And to look at how people are jockeying for position with regard to each other in a social situation where they're motivated to make a good impression on each other. And so if that's the effect you want to create, you have to write the story so that this is what the characters want and need. There has to be. So you have a situation where Prince Radi, who initially is absolutely just phoning it in, being absolutely arrogant, first he gets interested in Nicole, then he figures out maybe it's not such a great idea to be interested in Nicole. Then he gets kind of interested in Livia. Then he gets really interested in getting the hell out of there. But he's in the middle of the park, in the middle of the night. Yeah. He's not even near a road.
Yeah.
And it's raining, and his shoes are really, really, really wet.
Yeah.
And just going squish every time he
has a bad night.
He has a pretty difficult night.
It's a tricky night. Okay, I will throw to audience questions in just a moment. So if you have those, we'll get microphones out to you. But in terms of process, I'm always so fascinated by, I don't write any fiction, but by fiction writers' process and practice. The great Australian novelist Michelle de Kretser describes writing fiction as akin to walking a tightrope, being suspended incredibly high with no net, and there's no rope. You're making the rope as you write the book. Is that how it feels? I'm trying to evoke the feeling. I feel like that really evokes the feeling of writing a novel to me. Who's
I
never
don't
done
feel
it.
a sense of danger when I'm writing.
Okay.
No, not even close. But the part about making the rope,
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
I like it. So yeah, you anything that's there, you're creating as you go with this deep knowledge of these characters.
Right, and it has to be. It has to be something like a rope. I mean, that people can. They have to know what direction. But it is. It's one word after another.
It is that simple. It's one word after another.
But it has. I mean, it's an interesting medium because it takes time. It's like music, and so there's pacing. There are beats. There can be rhythm in the way you write your prose, or the rhythm of recurring motifs. So it's not just rope. I mean, some novelists will just rope you in, and using some cheap trick that I refuse to use.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one reason, I suppose, that I like my novels, and at the same time, like I'm not Colleen Hoover. I'm not selling a bazillion of these things because I'm just not going to do a damsel in distress.
No,
it's not going to happen.
No.
My damsels are not.
No, Nicole, none of those women are in distress.
Because the idea of torturing women for entertainment purposes or making them feel bad, just. It's not on my list of things I want to accomplish as an artist.
We're grateful to you for that, for
thank
providing
you.
an alternative. I want to talk about your dialogue. I feel your dialogue it's so alive. It feels so true and spoken. And do you enjoy writing dialogue?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel like you're having a really good time writing it.
It is fun to do. And when I was young, like in high school, what I wanted to be was a playwright.
Right.
And I would write.
I'm not surprised.
And I always thought you should be able to, characterize people through what they say, create conflict just with dialogue. But at the same time, I think like in literary prose writing, you have a lot of novels now really are just mostly dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's definitely the easiest thing to write because you never have to go outside the everyday vernacular language people use all the time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Whereas if you're writing a book with descriptions or like evocative passages, you have a lot of other possibilities.
Do you think we're losing interiority in fiction a little bit? Because of that? Because of...
Well, what I think is just that there's a lot of genre crossover into what people call literary fiction, and it's not really all that literary.
Yeah.
But publishers are desperate people. They're chronically desperate, but right now especially desperate.
Yeah.
And so they're perfectly willing to take what's basically a superhero story and call it literary fiction and publish it with a imprint like Jaclyn and see if people are going to go for it.
Yeah, you do see that. I've been very greedy with time and talking to Nell, and we do want to hear audience questions. There's microphones. Just raise your hand if you have a question, and a microphone will be brought to you, and you can pose the question. I have a million more if you don't.
I can't see you.
No, we don't need to see them. The microphone.
So
these
questions are entirely anonymous.
We'll just start hearing a voice.
I'm blinded by these lights. So just do your worst.
Nell, question for you.
Yeah.
Has the nature of your
I don't even know what direction this is coming from, by the
front
way.
Row.
I literally can't see you.
Very front row now. Has the nature of your storytelling changed since you left the US and moved to another continent in terms of character, storytelling, and so on?
When I lived in the US, I had time to write about one very short story every 3 months because I had to work full time to have health insurance. So yes, it has changed. I began writing longer stuff after I left the United States, and was able to, first in Israel, I was kind of a slacker at first. And then when I got to Germany, I got a student visa, and eventually I got the health insurance for artists. And, I was making, when your rent is 300 euros and you can make 90 euros an hour translating, you do the math. I was not having to work a lot to make a living in Germany. So that's when I was able to do ambitious work. And then after I got my first big advance, for Mislaid, then I was able to just, kick back and do nothing but write. When you're a writer, you pretend that everything you do is writing because the actual typing process might only take you a few weeks. But
you have published 7 novels in 12 years, though.
I'm
that's
a pretty
decent output.
busy bee as writers go.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And I'm just glad I did because as far as I can tell, the literary market is not what it used to be, and I was just like hammering them out. I had a lot of ideas, and I would just sit down and do it.
Yeah. You have time for one more question, if there's one more question from the audience. The microphone's coming.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hey, my name's Hugo. You probably get this question all the time, but advice to anyone trying to write their first book. My wife is quite a bit further along than I am, but just interested to hear what you have to say.
The advice?
Yeah. For writers, advice for writers.
Craft advice or how to find a publisher advice? I mean it seriously. What kind of advice?
More about craft advice and getting the piece of art to a place where you feel that it's finished and it's ready to go out to someone, for someone else to read it. Yeah.
I wrote a piece once for Literary Hub called "How to Become a Novelist in 10 Easy Steps," so you could look that up. But the gist of it was, this is advice that might no longer be entirely valid, but I think it has there's a grain of truth to it, which is you need a really killer first 5 pages. And when I say killer, I mean you have to ramp it up. If you can have I once, a very successful literary editor once said to me on the phone, she said that she had gotten a really great manuscript in the other day, and she said, "In the first paragraph, a horse explodes." You do not pull your punches. Yeah. I think one thing that really helps me is I inherited from my dad a book called The Story of 100 Operas. And you have to look at some opera plots and realize just what the possibilities are, just how far you can go. If you sit down and think for a second about the plots of TV shows you like, they seem so real because you're seeing actors on a screen and they're it's California. But when you think about what's actually going on, it's crazy stuff. And I think you have to be willing to, when it's your first book and you want some attention, make those first five pages be really, really hard to forget. And then write 195 more pages. And it doesn't necessarily matter what's on those pages, but they have to exist because you cannot sell a partial if you're starting out. And as far as the craft of what should be in those 195 pages, that's a matter of your own taste to such an extent. And there's no pot so crooked there isn't a lid to fit it. Even if your taste is to write something or to be proud of having written something that I think is complete trash, even if I would hate it, that doesn't mean anybody else would hate it. I hate everything. And there's an editor out there for every kind of book, but you have to just be incredibly, incredibly patient, because reading a novel takes hours, and for people to find those hours, it sometimes takes months.
Yeah.
So you have to have your 200 pages, of which the first 5 pages are mind-blowing, and then
See what happens from
be
there.
very, very patient. And as far as craft tips, the late novelist Faye Weldon, on her website, it's like Faye Weldon Co. UK or something. She has great craft tips.
Oh, that's a good
So
tip.
if you like the really solid, like pragmatic craft tips, she's the one.
Okay. Did everyone note that down? We're going to all be looking at that website tonight. So we are out of time. I, of course, want to thank you, Nell Zink, for your wonderful insights, but more importantly, for your work. I am so grateful that I'm a reader at the time that you're a writer. I feel this is just serendipitous, and I've loved reading your work over the years as you've published it, and for coming all the way to Melbourne to talk to us about it. I'm very, very grateful to you. I want to thank the Wheeler Centre for putting on events like this and bringing authors to us in this great city, Melbourne of ours. A reminder that Hill of Content Bookshop has Nell's books for sale tonight, and Nell will be signing copies. And finally, I want to thank you all in this audience for coming along tonight and being such thoughtful readers and thinkers. Here's to fiction, an art form that we love so much. Long may she reign. Thank you.
Fiction!